What would you do if someone looked you in the eye and told you that you didn't belong? At 30,000 feet, in the luxury of first class, a sharply dressed passenger decided to humiliate a quiet black woman sitting beside him. He accused her of being in the wrong seat. Said people like her don't fly first class. The cabin went silent. No one moved. No one spoke. But what happened next left the entire plane stunned. Because the woman he tried to embarrass wasn't just another passenger. She wasn't trying to sneak into luxury. She was the reason the plane was even flying more efficiently. Minutes later, the captain's voice echoed through the cabin, and by the time he finished speaking, the same man who mocked her couldn't even look her in the eye. This isn't just a story about humiliation. It's a story about assumptions crashing at 30,000 feet and dignity rising even higher. Stay with me, because this lesson is something everyone needs to hear. Unbelievable tension filled the first-class cabin the moment he opened his mouth. Passengers had just settled into their wide leather seats on a flight from New York to Los Angeles. The soft hum of the engines blended with quiet conversations and the gentle clink of champagne glasses. Flight attendants moved gracefully down the aisle, offering warm towels and welcoming smiles. Everything felt polished, calm, exclusive, exactly what first class was meant to be. Until a sharply dressed man in his late 50s abruptly stood up. His sudden movement drew attention. He adjusted his expensive-looking suit jacket, glanced around as if seeking an audience, and then pointed across the aisle. "You're in the wrong seat," he snapped at the elegantly dressed black woman sitting by the window. The cabin went still. Her name was Vanessa Cole. She wore a navy blazer tailored perfectly to her frame, diamond studs that caught the light, and an expression of quiet confidence. A leather briefcase rested at her feet, and her phone lay neatly on the armrest. She didn't look confused. She didn't look lost. Without raising her voice, she calmly reached into her purse and pulled out her boarding pass. "This is 2A," she said politely, holding it where he could see. The man barely glanced at it. His jaw tightened. "First class isn't for everyone," he muttered, loud enough for the surrounding passengers to hear. "You people always try to sneak in." A sharp gasp came from somewhere behind them. Someone shifted uncomfortably. Another passenger lowered their eyes, pretending not to notice. The air felt heavier, thicker, like oxygen had suddenly become expensive. Vanessa slowly lowered her boarding pass, but kept her posture straight. Her face remained composed, though her fingers lightly gripped the armrest. A flight attendant hurried over, her professional smile fading as she sensed the tension. "Is there a problem, sir?" "Yes," the man replied quickly. "She's in my seat." The attendant checked his ticket first, then Vanessa's. Her eyes scanned both carefully before she looked up. "Sir, Miss Cole is seated correctly in 2A. Your seat is 2B, right beside her." A few passengers subtly nodded. The evidence was clear, but the man wasn't finished. "I paid good money for this seat," he said, his voice rising with frustration. "I don't want to sit next to her." The words didn't just hang in the air, they stabbed through it. The humiliation was public. It was deliberate, and everyone knew exactly what he meant. For a brief second, all eyes turned to Vanessa, waiting for a reaction. Anger, tears, an argument. Instead, she inhaled slowly. She folded her hands neatly in her lap and looked straight ahead, as if refusing to let his ignorance become her burden. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was strength under control. The flight attendant straightened her shoulders. "Sir, those are your assigned seats. If you choose not to sit there, we may need to involve the captain." The man exhaled sharply, clearly irritated that no one was supporting him. With visible reluctance, he dropped into seat 2B, buckling his seatbelt with unnecessary force. The cabin slowly returned to motion, but the atmosphere had changed. Conversations were quieter now. Glances were cautious. Vanessa stared out the window at the runway lights, her reflection faintly visible in the glass. Calm, steady, unshaken. But behind that calm exterior was a story no one on that plane yet understood. And as the aircraft began, the flight attendant, Maria, handled the situation with steady professionalism. Her voice was calm, but firm. "Sir, Miss Cole's ticket is valid. She has every right to sit here." The man rolled his eyes dramatically. shaking his head as if he had been personally insulted. Unbelievable, he muttered under his breath before finally lowering himself into the seat beside her. He fastened his seatbelt with a sharp click, his frustration obvious to everyone within earshot. As the last passengers boarded, quiet whispers floated through the cabin like invisible currents. Some people pretended to scroll through their phones, avoiding eye contact. Others stole sympathetic glances at Vanessa, their expressions a mix of discomfort and silent support. No one spoke up, but everyone had witnessed what happened. Vanessa, however, refused to let the tension define her space. With measured calm, she reached into her briefcase and pulled out a slim silver laptop. The screen lit up, reflecting softly in her composed eyes. Spreadsheets filled with detailed charts and financial projections appeared on the display. Graphs showing growth trends, investment returns, and sustainability metrics covered the screen in neat precision. She wasn't just casually browsing. She was working. Her fingers moved confidently across the keyboard, typing notes with sharp focus. Occasionally, she adjusted figures or highlighted key points in a presentation. There was an unmistakable air of authority in the way she handled her documents, like someone used to making decisions that mattered. The man beside her couldn't help but glance at the screen. At first, his expression carried mild curiosity, but as he noticed terms like international fuel contracts, aviation partnerships, and board approval, his posture shifted slightly. Still, his pride kept him silent. 30 minutes into the flight, just as the aircraft reached cruising altitude, the seatbelt sign chimed off. A calm, confident voice filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking." Passengers paused their conversations. Some removed their headphones. It wasn't unusual for a captain to speak mid-flight, but something in his tone sounded deliberate. "We have a very special guest on board today." Curiosity rippled through first class. Heads turned subtly. A few passengers glanced toward the front row, assuming it might be a celebrity or public figure. "We would like to welcome Ms. Vanessa Cole, founder and CEO of Cole Aviation Technologies, one of our newest strategic partners." The word seemed to echo. Vanessa's fingers froze gently above her keyboard. Her company's innovation in sustainable jet fuel is transforming the future of air travel. Because of her groundbreaking work, our airline is taking major steps toward cleaner, more efficient flights. "Ms. Cole, we are honored to have you flying with us today." For a split second, there was pure silence. Then the cabin froze in realization. Eyes widened. Whispers stopped mid-sentence. The same passengers who had watched her be publicly questioned now stared in stunned disbelief. The man beside her felt the air leave his lungs. Cole Aviation Technologies. The name was everywhere in business news lately. A billion-dollar sustainability leader. A company reshaping the aviation industry. And she wasn't just an employee. She was the founder, the CEO. Applause began hesitantly from a few seats behind them. Then it grew louder, spreading through first class like a wave of awakening respect. Vanessa slowly closed her laptop, her movements unhurried. She offered a small, graceful nod, acknowledging the captain's words without arrogance. Beside her, the man's face had drained of color. His confident posture had vanished. His earlier certainty now felt embarrassingly small, because the woman he had tried to humiliate was helping power the very plane he was sitting on. Applause erupted across first class, louder and more unified than anyone expected. What had moments ago been an uncomfortable, divided cabin was now filled with admiration. Several passengers leaned into the aisle to catch a better look at Vanessa. Others clapped with genuine enthusiasm, their earlier silence now replaced with visible respect. The captain's voice continued over the intercom, steady and proud. "Thanks to Ms. Cole's groundbreaking work, airlines across the country are reducing emissions while increasing efficiency. Her leadership in sustainable jet fuel innovation is helping reshape the aviation industry. We are truly honored to have her on board today." The words carried weight. Vanessa gave a small nod, her expression composed. She offered a polite, restrained smile to those applauding her. There was no arrogance in her posture, just quiet acknowledgement. She had clearly been recognized before. This wasn't new to her, but for the man sitting beside her, this moment felt like the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. His complexion had gone pale. The confident edge in his posture was gone. He stared forward stiffly, blinking as if trying to process what he had just heard. Cole Aviation Technologies. The name echoed in his mind like a warning bell. He knew that company. Everyone in finance did. It had recently signed a multi-million-dollar partnership with this very airline, a deal that had made headlines across major business networks. Analysts called it one of the most promising green energy ventures in aviation history. Vanessa's face had appeared on magazine covers, featured in interviews discussing innovation, leadership, and the future of sustainable travel. But he hadn't recognized her. He had only seen what he wanted to see. And then the realization hit him even harder. He worked for a major investment firm, one that had been aggressively trying to secure a stake in Cole Aviation Technologies. Internal meetings, strategy sessions, projections. Her company had been at the center of it all for months. And now, the CEO of that company was sitting inches away from him. The same woman he had just humiliated. Slowly, almost mechanically, he turned toward her. His earlier arrogance had dissolved into something much smaller. I didn't realize, he began, his voice uneven. Vanessa calmly closed her laptop. The soft click of it shutting seemed louder than the applause had been. She placed it neatly on her lap before turning her head toward him. Her expression wasn't furious. It wasn't bitter. It was steady. "You didn't realize I belonged here?" she asked quietly. The question wasn't loud, but it cut through him. His face burned red, spreading from his collar to his temples. He swallowed hard. "That's not what I meant," he said quickly, though even he seemed unsure of his own defense. Vanessa held his gaze, not with hostility, but with quiet strength, the kind of strength built from years of proving herself in rooms where she was underestimated, the kind of strength that didn't need to shout. "It usually is," she replied gently. Around them, passengers suddenly became very interested in their drinks, their phones, the safety card in the seat pocket. But no one missed a word. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was heavy with awareness. The man shifted uncomfortably in his seat. For the first time since boarding, he had nothing clever to say, no complaint to raise, no superiority to lean on, just the undeniable truth sitting beside him, and the realization that assumptions can collapse faster than applause can rise. For the rest of the flight, the man barely spoke. The confident tone he had boarded with was gone, replaced by stiff silence. He kept his eyes forward, occasionally pretending to scroll through his phone, though the screen remained untouched for long stretches of time. Every now and then, he glanced sideways at Vanessa, but quickly looked away, as if the weight of his earlier words had become too heavy to face directly. Vanessa, on the other hand, returned to her work. She reopened her laptop and continued reviewing documents as if nothing had happened. Her composure hadn't cracked. If anything, it seemed stronger now, calm, steady, unshaken by public embarrassment or public praise. To her, both were distractions from purpose. About 20 minutes before landing, a senior flight attendant approached her seat with a respectful smile. "Miss Cole," she said softly, leaning slightly closer to maintain privacy. "The captain would love to greet you personally after we land. He asked if you would be willing to step into the cockpit for a quick hello." Vanessa looked up, surprised but gracious. "That would be lovely. Please thank him for me." The attendant nodded warmly before returning to her duties. The plane began its descent into Los Angeles, sunlight streaming through the windows as the city skyline slowly came into view. The wheels touched down smoothly, and a light round of applause echoed again, this time for the landing. But something unexpected happened once the seatbelt sign turned off. Instead of rushing to grab their bags and push toward the exit, several passengers paused near Vanessa's seat. A woman in her 40s stepped closer first. She leaned down slightly and whispered, "The way you handled that was powerful." There was admiration in her eyes, not just for Vanessa's success, but for her restraint. Vanessa smiled gently. "Thank you." A few moments later, a middle-aged man extended his hand. "My daughter wants to be an engineer," he said sincerely. "Seeing you today, how you carried yourself, it means more than you know." Vanessa shook his hand firmly. "Tell her the sky was never the limit," she replied warmly. The words lingered in the air, simple but profound. "One by one, A handful of passengers offered quiet words of respect before exiting. The earlier tension had transformed into something else entirely, reflection, perhaps even inspiration. And then there was him. The man who had insulted her now stood awkwardly in the aisle, gripping the handle of his carry-on. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, clearly debating whether to say anything at all. As Vanessa rose from her seat and stepped into the aisle, he cleared his throat. "I owe you an apology." She paused, turning to face him fully. His voice was different now, lower, stripped of arrogance. "I accept accountability," he continued, visibly nervous. "What I said was wrong. There's no excuse for it." For a moment, she studied him carefully, not searching for humiliation, not seeking revenge, just measuring sincerity. "Growth begins with honesty," she said calmly. "I hope you remember this moment the next time you judge someone." He nodded slowly, absorbing every word. Vanessa gave a slight nod in return, then turned and walked forward, head high, shoulders back, steps steady and confident. Not because she needed validation from applause, not because she needed recognition from strangers, not because an apology erased what happened, but because she had always known her worth, and no one's ignorance could ever take that away. At the gate, the captain was already waiting. As soon as the cabin door opened, he stepped forward with a warm, respectful smile. "Miss Cole," he said, extending his hand, "it's truly an honor to have you on board." Vanessa shook his hand firmly. "Thank you, Captain. I appreciate the work you and your crew do every day." A few crew members gathered nearby, and someone snapped a quick photo. Not for publicity, not for headlines, just a quiet moment of recognition between professionals who understood the responsibility they carried in their respective fields. A couple of airline executives, who had been notified during the flight, approached as well. Their tone was polished, their words thoughtful. They spoke about upcoming meetings, future collaborations, and the impact their company's innovations would have on the next generation of aircraft. Respect was no longer subtle. It was undeniable. Meanwhile, the story of what had happened in first class traveled faster than the luggage on the conveyor belts. Passengers shared the moment in hushed but animated conversations as they walked through the terminal. "Did you see what happened? That was her. I can't believe he said that to her." By the time they reached baggage claim, whispers had transformed into admiration. What began as a moment of public humiliation had turned into a powerful lesson witnessed by dozens. But Vanessa didn't smile at the irony. She didn't look back to see if the man who insulted her was watching. She didn't celebrate his embarrassment. Instead, she walked calmly beside the captain for a few steps, then excused herself and stood quietly near the carousel, waiting for her bag like everyone else. Because titles don't place you above people, and dignity doesn't require an audience. As she waited, her thoughts were reflective rather than triumphant. Prejudice often reveals more about the person speaking than the one being targeted. The man's words had not diminished her. They had exposed him. That day, at 30,000 feet, his assumptions had taken flight, but they had crashed hard against reality. And in that collision, something important had been revealed to everyone watching. A woman's dignity had soared even higher. The true power in that moment wasn't her title as CEO. It wasn't her wealth or influence. It wasn't even the applause that filled the cabin. It was her composure. She hadn't argued. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't tried to prove herself. She simply remained steady in who she already was. Because sometimes the strongest response to ignorance isn't shouting back. It's allowing truth to unfold on its own. It's letting success speak so clearly and so confidently that no insult can drown it out. And for everyone on that flight, every passenger who had witnessed the confrontation, the announcement, the apology, one lesson became crystal clear. Never underestimate someone based on your narrow view of the world. The person you dismiss today could be the very one shaping tomorrow. You never truly know who you're sitting next to, or how high they've already learned to fly. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you never to judge someone by appearances, take a second to hit that like button. It helps this message reach more people who need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful, eye-opening stories that challenge assumptions and celebrate strength, dignity, and success. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Remember, respect costs nothing, but its impact can change everything. I'll see you in the next story. Airplane.